In case you hadn't noticed from my previous videos, I've had a long-standing love affair with the music of Steely Dan. Today, I wanted to talk about how that happened. Hey there, Swan Shadow here. Welcome back to the nest for a very personal video. This is going to be a little bit different, a little less structured than what I normally do, because I wanted to talk today about how I became a fan of Steely Dan. Before we dive into that, please take a moment to tap that thumbs up icon for me. And if you're new to this channel, please take another moment to subscribe so that you can join us for all of our upcoming content. Thank you for your support. The first Steely Dan album I bought was the band's third album, Pretzel Logic. I heard Ricky Don't Lose That Number on the radio, and that song was so cool and so compelling that I just had to buy that record. Now, I had definitely heard some Steely Dan before. I was very familiar with songs like Do It Again and Reelin' in the Years because those played on the radio all the time. But I don't think I associated those songs with Ricky Don't Lose That Number, at least not at that time. But when I got Pretzel Logic home, and this was in the days of original vinyl, kids, it was as though a whole new musical universe opened up for me. I immediately fell in love with that album, particularly the first side of that album, which starts out absolutely golden with Ricky, Night by Night, Any Major Dude Will Tell You, and Barrytown, just boom, 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 boom. And then on the second side, the title track, Pretzel Logic, which became an early favorite for me with those twisty lyrics and those glorious Timothy B. Schmidt harmonies. Not too long after I bought Pretzel Logic, I went looking for other Steely Dan albums. I found Can't Buy a Thrill, the debut album. And I believe I was totally surprised to discover that Do It Again and Reelin' in the Years were by the same band as Ricky Don't Lose That Number and all of the other tracks on Pretzel Logic. Because so much musical evolution had taken place between that first album and Pretzel Logic that they sounded very different. In those early days of my musical experience, I really didn't understand how any of that would happen. And of course, I discovered other great tracks on that first album, aside from the two singles that I first heard. Midnight Cruiser, I think, was one of my very early favorites from Can't Buy a Thrill, along with Kings and Dirty Work, even though I didn't really like the voice of the guy who sang Dirty Work, I still loved the song. Sometime later, I don't think it was too long later, I also picked up the second album, Countdown to Ecstasy. I remember being really disappointed with that album because I didn't love it as much as I did either of the other two albums that I already owned. Over the course of time, I've come to understand better what was going on musically with Countdown to Ecstasy. And I like it much better now than I did in those much younger days. But I remember getting that album and being like, I don't like this much as I liked the other two albums. But then Katie Lied came out. And I got that one, I'm sure, not too long after it came out. Of course, there we heard Michael McDonald's voice for the first time on Bad Sneakers. And that grabbed my attention. That was the album that really sold me on Steely Dan, not just being a band that I liked a lot, but being one of my very favorite bands, as they've continued to be from that point forward. By the time that the Royal Scam hit the record stores, I was already a hardcore fan by that point. That album just had such an impact on me, and it was so different from the other things that I was listening to at that time. That album came out in 1976. And by then I was still listening to Chicago and the Doobie Brothers. Boston's first album had come out by that time. The Steve Miller Band was a group that I was playing a lot. And I was heavily into Kansas and Blue Oyster Cult by that time. The Royal Scam had a flavor and a style that was just so completely unlike other things that I enjoyed. I think that was a big part of what made it special for me, that it was something that I liked, but that it was unique and different. And that was always a thing, I think, for me that made Steely Dan special, that there really isn't any other music like it. Nobody else writes songs quite like theirs. No one composes lyrics or crafts musical elements the way that Becker and Fagen did at that time. What Steely Dan was doing was truly one of a kind. In fact, sometimes someone will ask me, well, if I like Steely Dan, what other bands should I be listening to? And I always get stuck with, I don't know, there's not really any other band quite like them. I think in large part because of that, when Asia came out, that of course had rocked my world, and indeed the entire music world. Nobody had ever heard an album quite like Asia. Certainly nothing else sounded like that album. There was a good reason that people used that album to show off the quality of their stereo equipment, because it was such a beautifully recorded and engineered record. And still today it sounds like nothing else, particularly nothing else from that time period. And I have to admit, I wore the grooves off my copy of Asia pretty much. I played that record over and over and over again. I took it with me to college, and there were a lot of nights when I was sitting alone in my dorm room and I just played that album non-stop, particularly Deacon Blues. That became kind of a personal anthem for me. It sort of embodied a lot of the feelings that I was wrestling with as a young person, just coming into adulthood at that time, and despairing of what I was going to do with the rest of my life, and being unsure about so many things. I think Deacon Blues really captures that feeling of frustration and alienation. Then it was while I was in college that Gaucho came out. I remember putting that album on for the first time, expecting more of Asia. And it sort of is, but there's some really different kinds of things on Gaucho as well. I didn't warm to Gaucho as much immediately as I had the two albums before it. But I instantly fell in love with the song Hey 19, because 19 has always been my lucky number. And so I related very much to that song. And then of course there were Babylon Sisters and Gaucho itself, and especially Time Out of Mind, which I think is a real gem on that album. As I had done with Asia, I practically played the groove off the vinyl of that record. So where did all of this lead me? I think for me, number one, I consider myself an intelligent person, a literate person, and the quality of the songwriting, the lyrics of Steely Dan was one of the things that from the very beginning captured my attention. I've never been a musician other than the fact that I've done some singing, but I've never been an instrumental musician, and so I could never really understand the complexity of the musical things that they were doing, but I could appreciate the sound. And I could appreciate how all the elements came together to produce something that sounded so wonderful and yet again sounded so different from anything else that was popular at that time. It really resonated with me. My three favorite musical acts of all time are considered sort of thinking person's bands: Steely Dan and Kansas and Blue Oyster Cult. And with all of those, the lyrics of the songs, the music as well, of course, but the lyrics of Steely Dan particularly connected with me in a way that nothing else really did. I don't know whether you relate to any of this rambling nonsense, but that's how my love for Steely Dan evolved. I'd be interested in knowing what your journey was like. How did you fall in love with this band, if indeed you have? And what were some of the factors that hooked you and grabbed you and got you into being a fan of this music? Let me know in the comments how you got where you are, if you're a Steely Dan fan. If you've enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate it if you'd give it a like. And also subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be talking about a lot of musical stuff here, and if you enjoy this kind of thing, you'll want to be here when I do that. And maybe tell a friend or three. We can use all the subscribers and all the viewers that we can get. Until I see you again next time, be well and do well by the people around you. And as some wise person once asked, is there gas in the car? Yes, there's gas in the car.